Good morning. Oh, long time no see. Well, pursuant to my legislative obligation in the Environmental Bill of Rights, today I'm releasing my third annual greenhouse gas report entitled Meeting Responsibilities, Creating Opportunities. I think it's significant this report is coming out at a time that the North American continent is experiencing extensive and wide-ranging extreme weather events of unprecedented severity. Such floods and droughts and torrents and tornadoes are exactly what is predicted by models of unmitigated climate change, and perhaps that's what we're seeing. Or perhaps, to use a Shakespearean analogy, it's a real-world pathetic fallacy to the theater of the tempest in climate change policy across North America, where anger, confusion, chaos, and uncertainty reign. How are we doing, and is it enough? And these are the questions that challenge all political jurisdictions seeking to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. In Ontario, I address those questions by considering progress on the 2007 Climate Change Action Plan, and the answers in my report are not as straightforward as one might expect. 4 years into the CCAP process, how are we doing? You may recall that Ontario emissions of greenhouse gases reported to the United Nations by Canada for 2007 and 2008 were 200 and 190 megatons. Hopefully, they were headed towards a target of 166 megatons for the year 2014. Now, just days ago, the federal government released its numbers for 2009. For Ontario, the emissions reported for 2009 were 165 megatons, slightly below the 2014 target. Now, superficially, one might react by saying, job done, but that is not the situation. The tremendous drop in emissions between 2008 and 2009 were coincident with a corresponding severe drop in economic output. The GDP of the province contracted by 3.6% that year, and the greenhouse gas emissions are, to some degree, coupled with economic activity. Now, the economy grew by 2.8% in 2010. Now, we won't know the exact what that meant for greenhouse gas emissions until the federal government releases its 2010 numbers next April. But because of that coupling, we expect emissions will grow correspondingly. Now, the province recognizes this to some degree because in their recent CCAP update report, they conclude that the province will be 4 megatons over their 166 megaton target in 2014. Now, in our analysis, we've looked more closely at this relationship and considered the GDP growth estimates projected by the government's budget for the next few years. And by choosing the most favorable relationship between grams of CO2 and dollars of GDP, the best projection we can calculate for 2014 with this amount of economic growth, the expected amount of economic growth, puts the province not at 4 megatons over, but at 13 megatons over their target. So how are we doing, and is it enough? Well, we're not going to make the 2014 target or the 2020 target on our present trajectory and with our present tools. So no, it's not enough. The program has to be designed, managed, and implemented better. I have identified before, and I'm calling again today, for overall targets to be broken down into sector targets so that we can identify what parts of the plan are working and which are not. Take transportation, for example. It accounts for about a third of all emissions, yet not only are we failing to aggressively address reductions in this sector, the government has actually terminated 3 greenhouse gas reduction programs that were operating in that sector in the past year. So I'm calling for the province to figure out how to put a price on carbon. British Columbia has a carbon tax, Alberta has a de facto tax and a tech fund price, and Quebec has a carbon levy on all fuels. Pricing carbon now, however modestly, begins to prepare the economy for the coming transition when the price of carbon becomes embedded in international trade and commerce. And we clearly need more greenhouse gas reduction tools in the toolkit. What we're using isn't enough. In that regard, my report challenges the government on what we might do differently and what we might do new. For example, I'm strongly recommending that the Ministry of Environment take a fresh and closer look at our programs to incent landfill gas extraction for energy production. There is evidence that current practices may be making things worse because of the escape of fugitive emissions of the powerful greenhouse gas methane. And with respect to new opportunities, I direct the province's attention to the potential to sequester large amounts of carbon in agricultural soils, something that we're not pursuing in Ontario to date. It's time to reconsider what we're trying to achieve in the CCAP and why. So far in 2011, Ontario may have been spared the trauma of extreme weather events, but we may not be so lucky in the future. But regardless, nothing has diminished our obligation to the world community and to generations to come to do our best to mitigate the climate crisis that is upon us. Do you have any questions?